Well, hello and welcome to another video. Dr. Syl here, Junior Doctor from Sydney, Australia. And I've just finished making a video on Xanax. And then I came across this video of Jordan Peterson talking about coming off of benzodiazepines and his experience and the risks associated with benzodiazepines, which we talked about in that previous video. I thought it would be interesting to do a bit of a reaction to this and talk about like a kind of case where benzodiazepine withdrawal has been a big issue, and we can reflect on some of the things we've talked about with benzodiazepines. For those of you who don't know, a quick rundown: benzodiazepines are GABAergic medicines. What does that mean? GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter, and benzodiazepines increase the effects or the function of that receptor, and so you get higher levels of GABA activity in the brain, which is inhibitory and sedating and calming. So for people who have panic attacks and anxiety, it is indicated in their treatment depending on the circumstance. The problem is if you become dependent on benzodiazepines, like if you take them regularly, then that can be a problem if you take it for too long, because you become dependent on that GABA effect. And so when you come off of benzodiazepines, you've got no more external cause of the GABA, and your body hasn't been doing it itself. So you have a withdrawal effects. You have a rebound anxiety, which can be worse than the initial anxiety. Not only that, but if you take it regularly for a long amount of time, then the risks of withdrawal can be very substantial. Even you can get withdrawal seizures. And I've seen people with withdrawal seizures, and I've had to chart intramuscular midazolam to stop the seizures and put cannulas in while people are shaking and stuff. So it's very traumatic to see, and I've seen it in the emergency department a couple of times. And these are some of the risks of benzodiazepines. But what you need to remember before watching this is there are risks associated with any treatment, okay? There are risks associated with benzodiazepines, but you have to compare those to the risks of not taking the benzodiazepines, okay? Part of shared decision making, where the doctor and the patient make the decision together, where you justify whether you need the benzos or not. And the key principles in benzos is it's short term, and you avoid taking it regularly. You try and just do it on an as-needed basis. So if you have a panic attack, some people have benzodiazepines charted and they'll have a panic attack 3 or 4 times a year, and they'll take it when they have those panic attacks. But for the rest of the year, they don't take it. That's okay, right? It's really, if you're taking it daily for more than a month, that you have to be careful. The other common use of benzodiazepines is if you have an anxiety disorder and you can't sleep and you're not functioning, and you need to start on oral medicines to help with the anxiety disorder, like an SSRI, those can take a month to start having an effect. So you can kind of take the benzodiazepines during that month, 3 weeks-ish, whilst the other medicine is starting to have its effect. Anyway, with that context in mind, let's check out this video of Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan talking about benzodiazepine withdrawals.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
What is it like to be you? Like, what is it like to, and then I know, you've gone through a lot of shit. And this latest thing with getting off of the benzodiazepine, that to me was a real shocker. Because first of all, I had no idea that you were taking it. And then to find out that it's that difficult to get off of, and then to hear from other people that have tried to get off of it how difficult it is. And then to realize how many people around me have an issue with that stuff. Xanax is a motherfucker. And I didn't know what a motherfucker it was until I talked to a friend who is a counselor at a drug rehab center, where he was saying that that is one of the ways that people get locked back into drinking and doing drugs, is a psychiatrist will prescribe Xanax. And sober people who get on Xanax all of a sudden start drinking. He said it's super common. He said that it's one of the most difficult drugs to get off of.
So that's a really bad combination. Essentially Xanax is a GABAergic medicine and alcohol is a GABAergic drug. And so you've got two things that are very GABAergic, which means you've got all this inhibitory activity happening, or lack of activity. And so you start becoming more sedated. You're at increased risks of falls. You can get respiratory depression, where you don't protect your airways as well. So if you're drinking a lot and you get drunk and you vomit and you fall asleep, you could aspirate, and vomit can go into the lungs and things like that. So it can be really dangerous. You never want to mix Xanax with any other kind of like alcohol, essentially.
And this is something that Dr. Carl Hart, who's I love him to death. He's brilliant. He speaks so openly and honestly about drugs, and the guy's a professor at Columbia. He said that there's 2 drugs that will kill you when you get off of them. He goes, it's alcohol and benzodiazepine. Those are the 2 that if you just...
The thing that Joe Rogan here is not doing justice to at all, and that's fair enough, he's not a doctor or whatever, is that although you can get withdrawal seizures from benzodiazepines and alcohol, it can be avoided. Okay, you don't always get, bloody withdrawal seizures. It's very avoidable if you have a good drug and alcohol doctor or a good GP or a good psychiatrist who taper you down, lowering the doses of the benzodiazepines bit by bit every day, or transitioning you first to a longer acting one and then lowering that dose and decreasing the frequency. And with alcohol, same thing. With alcohol, you go to a benzo and then you decrease over 3 to 5 days. So just because you're drinking, you shouldn't not stop drinking because you're worried about withdrawal seizures, or just because you're on benzos, you shouldn't not stop benzodiazepines because you're worried of withdrawal seizures. You should just talk to your doctor and work with them to get on top of the withdrawal effects. It's going to be hard. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do in your life, hands down. And I'm sorry that people have to go through it. But it's important not to take regular benzodiazepines for the rest of your life.
You'll fucking die. And
or you wish you would.
Meanwhile, they're handing those things out like Tic Tacs.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Sorry. That's not fair at all. Let me say one thing. Benzodiazepines have to be earned, okay? And what do I mean by that? Benzodiazepines have serious risks. I appreciate that completely. But there's serious risks in not starting benzodiazepines too. If you're working and you're having anxiety, panic attacks, and you can't sleep and you can't think straight because you haven't slept in 2 nights, and your anxiety is seriously debilitating, then that justifies the use of a benzodiazepine for a little while. It just has to follow some key principles. Short term, avoid it being regular. Try just going for an as needed basis. And if it is regular, never for more than a couple of weeks to a month. And you have to have the other medicine started, as well as psychological therapies, as well as healthy lifestyle interventions. So exercise, good diet, and healthy sleep cycles. And as well as a less stressful job, because if your job is causing this, then this is the big thing. People just never want to quit their jobs. But I'm telling you, if you've got a job that's stressing you out so much that you're having panic attacks and you need benzos, then maybe that's not the right job for you. All right, plain and simple. But anyway, all this to say that benzodiazepines can be indicated and used in certain situations. I mean, the treatment for a seizure is benzodiazepines. You're going to use them, right? They're indicated. You're not just going to let someone seize because you're worried they'll get addicted or whatever. So if you use them in the right way, you can avoid the risks of addiction and tolerance. But anyway, let's keep going.
Well, they were regarded as a safe substitute for barbiturates, and you could easily overdose on barbiturates, especially with alcohol.
Well, when did they know? When was it in the literature, the difficulty of detoxing yourself from these?
Very recently.
Really?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. And when did they start being handed out?
20 years ago.
Fuck.
More.
So what happened? People just stayed on them?
Often.
I have one good friend that takes it every day, and takes it oftentimes with alcohol, which I know you're absolutely not supposed to do. There's not a damn thing I can do about it. This is a friend that I love to death, and I put my hands up and I go, there's nothing I can do. And he's been on it for more than 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think a good point here is if people need to want to change. You can't. This isn't medical advice or anything. This is more like friendship advice. If you have a friend doing like drugs and alcohol in an unhealthy way, you can only support them to do what they want to do. And you can let them know though, like to say you can't do anything is a little bit of a cop out, but you can say, look, mate, what I think you're doing is dangerous. And if you ever want to stop, or if you ever need support, or if you ever want me to come with you to a GP or a doctor to talk about your issues, I'm happy to give you a lift. I'm happy to support you. But you just let me know. I've had that conversation with friends.
Well, I started taking them because I was ill.
Yeah.
And they helped because I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep at all. I don't know. I still really don't.
It's very strange, for a mental health professional to not be able to know in what way they were ill and couldn't sleep.
Know what happened
you
to
couldn't
me.
sleep, and so an anti-anxiety medication. Do you think that this is one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about. This is why I brought up the fame thing. How much of the pressure of being attacked by all these different people and having these people write these horrible articles about you, and I know you read that stuff, which is different from me. I don't read stuff about me, and I think that's helped me tremendously. And that, like, my gauge of how I deal with people is, like I said,
Tucker Carlson doesn't read things about him either.
You could tell. You can tell by the way he communicates. He seems free. You know, there's a burden that people carry around when they read things about themselves. Like Eric Weinstein has that burden sometimes. You know, when people read.
Yeah, well, part of the reason. So, did I read things about me? Well, yeah, but that wasn't what was stressful exactly, although it was.
It's a
what was
multitude
stressful
of things.
when I first got, I've had a history of depression, and that runs in my family, and that probably stems back for me right to the time when I was a kid. And I think when I really got sick in 2016, it was partly a manifestation of that. But at the time, my job was threatened, like actually.
Right. Yeah.
And my clinical practice was threatened. And the Canadian Revenue Agency was after me all at the same time. And they were after me because of a mistake they had made, which they admitted 3 months later. And the college was after me because of a vindictive client who came after me with a pack of lies, but because they were so... And basically I emerged from that unscathed, but that was by no means obvious that that was going to be the case. I was accused of sexual misconduct. And the evidence? When I was dealing with this client, I would turn my wedding ring around.
You'd spin it?
Well, I play with it.
Right. And that was sexual misconduct?
Yeah, well, to her it was a signal of some dark underlying desire that that was polluting our therapeutic relationship.
I've been doing that with you the whole conversation.
Yeah.
I have this silicone wedding ring.
Yeah, well, I'm going to report. I'd report you if you had
finger in there.
Yeah, exactly.
I do that all the time.
Yes, well, there you go.
Bad?
It's really bad. And if there was a college that governed the behavior of reprobates like you, I would definitely report. No, don't do that. That's terrible,
I
Joe.
stretch it out.
No, that's it's Freudian to the extreme. Although I don't know what turning it means.
How could stretching a silicone wedding band be Freudian?
Well, you're putting your finger in the little hole.
Rubber.
You're making,
Fuck kind of vaginas
well, rubber,
you're dealing with.
Rubber is, that's got...
One thing I do like about Joe Rogan is he's got like the status, I guess, to ask someone like Jordan Peterson what kind of vaginas he's dealing with. That is crazy.
Anyways, we don't have to go there.
So that was all you had done was play with your wedding ring.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I really helped her a lot. Like,
well, so unfortunately, when you're dealing with people that are extremely troubled, oftentimes they look for external reasons why they're troubled, and they find oppressors.
Well, she was also angry with me because when all this blew up around me, it interfered with my clinical practice, and she had come to rely on our weekly meetings.
Oh,
and so she was angry about being abandoned, and it was really sad because I didn't want to abandon my clients, but I had to stop my clinical practice, which was also very upsetting to me because I had like 20 clients and I knew these people, man. Like I knew these people.
Yeah.
I'd followed them through thick and thin. And then all of a sudden, so many things piled up around me that I found when I was in a clinical session that I was distracted. So you can't be distracted in a clinical session.
Right.
And so, anyways, what emerged from that, and it was in the middle of the winter, and I have seasonal affective disorder, I couldn't sleep.
Seasonal affective disorder is kind of like a major depressive disorder that is associated with winter. And the thinking is essentially that the lack of light, because Jordan Peterson's Canadian, so maybe they have less light. In Australia, it's not as big as a problem as some other countries, but the lack of light during winter and the shorter daylight time actually affects the biochemistry in the brain because, as you may know, light and melatonin have a cycle, and light goes into your eyes, hits the pineal, stimulates the pineal gland to inhibit the release of melatonin, and when light goes away, the pineal gland releases melatonin. That's the hormone that makes you sleepy, and if you disrupt a circadian rhythm, it's a major risk factor for anxiety and depressive disorders. In fact, some of the antidepressants, the new ones like agomelatine, is an antidepressant that works basically by hitting melatonin receptors, as well as some other receptors, but it has its effect theoretically, we think, from its effect on melatonin receptors. So interesting how that can improve depression. But anyway, that's a little bit about seasonal affective disorder.
All for quite a long time, and I went to my doctor and I said I can't sleep, and he gave me a sleeping medication and an anti-anxiety drug, and I took a little bit of the anti-anxiety drug, and I could sleep. And my life was pretty stressful. And I thought, okay, I'm much better. I'm just going to leave this be. This is working. I'm not going to muck with it because I could barely go back to work.
And what was it? A low dose
Yeah. I couldn't even
of
feel it.
Xanax? Really?
Yeah, it was a low dose.
So it alleviated the anxiety, but it didn't affect your cognitive performance, or it didn't affect the way.
Well, it didn't affect it as much as how sick I was. Like that.
That's an interesting line he just said. So benzodiazepines do affect your cognitive performance. Okay, they are associated with brain fog for some people, in certain people. But what he just said, it didn't affect me as much as my anxiety or the symptoms he was having without it. And so that's what I mean by you've got to justify the risks of the medicine versus the risks of not taking the medicine. It's not as simple as just being like, oh, you took benzos, psychiatrists are evil for prescribing it because they have addictive properties. It's like, no, you've got to think about the risk and benefit, guys.
Really affected
So
it.
sick meaning depressed.
No,
you mean
no.
When
no,
you say
no,
you're
it was,
sick.
No. When it hit, if I stood up, my blood pressure was really low. If I stood up, I'd faint. I was fainting 5 or 6 times a day.
Oh my
When are we
gosh.
talking about here?
2016.
Okay, so this was when
That's a
all the
physical issue.
pressure from all these different sources was coming at you.
Yeah.
So, just reading into that a bit, if you're fainting posturally and you have a mental health problem by itself doesn't cause postural hypotension, which is what causes this fainting. But mental health problems can cause you to have decreased intake. Jordan Peterson's a pretty thin guy. This is all speculation, by the way. I'm just thinking through different possibilities. So maybe he had decreased fluid and oral intake, and so then he was dehydrated, and so he was at an increased risk of fainting. Benzodiazepines can also make you wobbly on your feet and increase the risk of falls in the elderly, but he's not that frail.
That was making you sick. So it was
No,
physically.
yeah, that was part of it. I think what it did was it stressed me enough so that I was more susceptible to whatever was wrong with me in the first place.
So there was
I've had a
something.
lot of immunological problems.
How long did it take you to recover from the benzos?
Well, when I finally 2 years. And I haven't fully recovered, but also I was also sick. No, my left hand is quite numb, and was way more numb. Both hands and my feet were like completely numb.
Oh my gosh!
And I was in like excruciating pain for 2 years, like pain at levels that I didn't even know was possible.
All the time, or
no,
on occasion?
No, this is one of the things that was terrible about it is that it was really, really bad in the morning.
And did it start right after you got off of the Xanax?
No, but it got way worse.
So it just started showing up eventually.
Yeah.
And then
it started to get worse about the same time that Tammy went into the hospital, but because she was fighting her way through, catastrophic cancer at the same time when this started to happen.
So this was additional stress.
Yes.
And that heightened everything.
Well, it certainly didn't help.
Right.
I think it made me more susceptible to something that was already happening. So whatever this illness that's plagued my family, my father, my grandfather, multiple cousins, and a lot of immunological problems on my mother's side too. I have a cousin whose daughter died of immunological problems, the same ones that Michaela had.
And this is all mitigated somehow?
And Michaela, his daughter, has a juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, I think I read. But it sounds like he's just got this really bad luck with a family genetic disorder. I mean, benzodiazepines don't cause this pain in your hands. I've never heard of that. There might be some rare exception. Please leave in the comments if you've ever heard of it. But as he said, coming off of them makes it worse. And that's basically because GABA and mental health in general modulates how you experience pain. So if you are anxious or depressed, you can feel pain much more intensely than someone who is not. And so they can modulate it better. So maybe coming off of it, the withdrawal effects and everything is making his pain modulation affected, and therefore he's experiencing this kind of chronic hand pain that he gets in a worse way. How interesting. Well, how interesting, guys. Yeah, look, I think that's an interesting discussion to see. This video has 3 million views, so I think it's worth making a comment about maybe being a little bit more nuanced than Joe Rogan, and maybe just providing some of the context around why benzos are used. You know, it's just important to remember that medicine and psychiatry and mental health is all complicated. So statements like, oh, they hand them out like Tic Tacs, it's just like, nah, bro. you just don't get it, that's all. And yeah, I mean, Joe Rogan's an open-minded dude who likes to learn about lots of things, so I'm not going to criticize him too heavily, but yeah, that statement kind of triggered me. And otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that was insightful. If you haven't seen the video on my Medication Mondays series, you can check out. I'm doing a new medication every Monday. That's my goal. I'm making my way through a psychopharmacology textbook that I have as part of my psychiatry training. Anyway, I wish you guys all an awesome day. Please consider supporting the channel by leaving the video a like and subscribing and sharing it with your mates or whatever. And I need some inspiration. You know, I'm kind of I leave some comments on what you want me to react to or what kind of videos you'd be interested in watching, because I read those comments and I make those videos. So if there's anything you guys have that you'd be interested in a junior doctor in Australia's points of view, let me know. Otherwise, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.